about Bryce Harper and Rob Manfred. Obviously, Rob Manfred, a lot of people don't like him, and I get it. He's the commissioner, he's the figurehead. I think he's making a lot of good changes for baseball that needed to be changed without changing the entirety of the game. I sort of think NBA changed their whole model and it hurt them in a bad way. I think, and I'm a huge NFL fan still. I think the NFL has changed a lot from when I first watched it. But baseball has made changes. They had the runner on second, the pitch clock. They're working on challenging strikes and balls. A lot of stuff to make it more, more hitter friendly too, like the balls and stuff like that. A lot of stuff to make it more appealing to fans, and I think it's worked. And I feel like, again, I've been watching baseball since 2012, and I don't think it's really changed a lot since I first watched it. So credit to Rob Manfred on that. I know he's done some questionable stuff, and
Yeah.
this is a controversial thing because you're talking about not paying players much with the salary cap. So I heard so just some meetings details about that meeting before I throw it around. Um, you know, Rob Manfred, he didn't even really mention the salary cap. He was just mentioning the bargaining agreement that expires December 1st, 2026. He was expiring or talking about it with the Phillies clubhouse, seeing how they feel. At one point, Bryce Harper decided, he's sort of in the back, not really looking like he's paying attention. And then he um, storms to Manfred and tells him to shut the, what up. And Manfred, I guess, to stand his ground is like, try to act tough or whatever. I don't know. Says I'm not going to, and then, or maybe he wasn't, or maybe he was just trying to move on with the conversation. But I thought that was funny from the commissioner being like, I'm not going to shut that up. You can leave if you want, but um, or no, he didn't tell him that. He told him to get out of the clubhouse. But same sort of feeling, same sort of vibe.
Kind of
Um,
like how Gary Jago told Joe Buck in the All-Star game.
yeah, yeah. Some players, yeah, especially the stars, especially if they, if they feel like they're being wrong, they'll stick up for their former teammates. But
Yeah.
this is this worth sticking up for? I don't know. I think a salary cap, we've talked about this on the show a lot, in past years and even recent episodes, that I think a salary cap is good. But I guess whose side do you come down on this?
Yeah, I think a salary cap needs to be implemented so you don't see teams, obviously build a super team like the LA Dodgers are doing right now. Even the LA Dodgers, even the New York Yankees last night. I saw that their payroll is at like $297 million. That's just ridiculous. Even though not nearly as much as the Dodgers at 1 billion, I think. Signing Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think it's so much higher than the Yankees. I think there needs to be a salary cap so this doesn't happen again. So teams get a fair, playing field.
Yeah, Timmy, what do you think?
You know, I think it should be a lot because the MLB is big on their international players, so I think it should be a lot looser of a salary cap than NFL or NBA. But I think a salary cap because you have all these teams in big markets, Yankees, Dodgers, the other team in New York, um, that are just spending an outrageous amount of money to build super teams. And it's not fair for these teams in small markets the A's for now, the Rockies, hell, even the Marlins. These small markets are suffering because everybody wants to flood to these big name teams with all the money.
Yeah, I think the small markets are. So I agree with both of you. I think there should be a salary cap, and I'll explain that in a little more depth. But like, this some of the and to be fair to the other side of the argument, some of the small market teams are suffering because their owners suck. I'm looking at Colorado. I'm looking at Pittsburgh. I'm looking at like the Reds. Sometimes the White Sox. Um, but um, but
Same out with
I would say that like when you talk about a salary cap, you're just talking about like the minimum basis. You're just talking about like we're not going to control how every team, like, big market teams will still be the ones dishing out the money. You see that in the NFL, Mahomes is still getting 500 million. The Cowboys are still spending like crazy. Like again, we've talked about this in past episodes, so I don't want to go crazy on that, but that's why. And I think Bryce Harper, again, he wants to stand up for players, but he doesn't have the appropriate talking points yet. He doesn't know how to stand up for players in his mind. So he just decides to lash out. And again, I'm not saying I love everything Manfred has done, but I think he's changed, adapting appropriately to change. So I got to side with him on this. And, Harper doesn't have the appropriate talking points because he knows deep down, or he will find out eventually if he doesn't know, that a salary cap is good for the sport. I think it's better healthy for the sport. Again, like we just said, some owners do suck. But at the same time, uh, you know, it's important. I think some teams would spend more if there was more of a level playing field, but no team, is ever going to be able to pay Judge or Otani as much money as they want to be competitive. And especially with the Dodgers just winning last year, we'll see. We'll see if it's just big market teams throughout. It hadn't been that way, but it seems like the Dodgers almost bought their way last year. So I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't go that way, but yeah, it's going to get real interesting starting next year, I think.